Hello everyone, welcome to AJ Labs. In today's video we're going to look at how to set up a virtual lab using VMware Workstation Pro version 15. Now in my previous videos I said that using a physical lab is always the best way forward when you're learning IT. In some cases where you're restricted by space, maybe you don't have the space to put the physical equipment, or maybe you can't get your hands on physical equipment due to financial restrictions or whatever, then you probably want to set yourself up a virtual lab. In order to set up your virtual lab, you're going to need a machine, whether it's a laptop or a PC, with at least 16 gig of RAM and at least 500 gig of hard drive space. Once you've got that, you can then install VMware Workstation Pro and you can start setting up your virtual lab, whether it be a virtual lab based on networking or whether it be a virtual lab based on servers or desktop machines and so forth. Now, let's take a look at installing VMware Workstation Pro version 15 and setting up a virtual lab. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do is to download the VMware Workstation Pro version 15. On the website they've got version 15.5. I've currently got 15.0.2, but it's okay, you can download this version and it will give you a trial version, and you can then go through installing it and using the application to create VMs and so forth. I'll put a link I'll put this link in the description area. If you're running Windows, then download the Windows version. If you're running Linux, then you download the Linux version. So you just click on the download and then it will start downloading the application, as you can see just here. I've already got the application, so I'm just going to cancel out of this. You obviously need to download it, complete the download, and then double click on the application to start the installation process. So if I go to my desktop where I've got the application saved, I just double click on it here just to kick off the installation process. Once the installation wizard appears, then just click on Next, accept the license agreement, click on Next, and here just keep the default, so just click on Next. Again, if you want to check for updates on startup, you can do that. I just usually untick that, and the customer experience, I untick both of those. You can keep them if you want. Click on Next, create a desktop shortcut and Start Menu Programs folder. Yep, put it in both locations and then just install. So this will give me a trial version of the application, and as I said, once the trial expires, what you can do is you can actually just uninstall the application, reinstall it, and that will initiate your or restart the trial for you again. So if you don't have a license for it, that's probably the best way around it. It won't affect your virtual machines, it won't delete your virtual machines that you create or your virtual machine files and hard disks and so forth. So it will just remove the application from your Windows system, and then it will just reinstall it. So let's get this installation process complete and then take a look at VMware Workstation. Okay, so the installation is complete. Just click on Finish, and as you can see, it's created a desktop shortcut for me here, and also it hasn't placed it in my tray. Usually it does, but it hasn't done it on this occasion. So let me just double click on VMware Workstation Pro, so open up the application. Now as you can see, I've got no virtual machines at the moment, it's just a clean slate. Just to quickly go through some of the settings here, or some of the menus. If you click on File, you can create a new virtual machine or just open up a new window. We'll go through creating a new virtual machine in a moment. Or if you have some virtual machines saved on a hard drive somewhere, you can open them up, or on a network share you can open them up. You can also scan for virtual machines. So if you've got hard drives that are attached to your machine and you've got some virtual machines that are on there, or maybe you want to find out if the hard disk has had some virtual machines saved on there before, you can actually scan for virtual machines. So you just point to the location where you want to search the drive. In this case, mine's pointing to C. I'm not going to search or scan for it because I know I don't have any virtual machines in this location, but this is one good feature that you can use. If you have a disk that you know may have had virtual machines and you want to scan it, you can do that. Let's come out of that. You can also connect to a server. So if you've got an ESXi server or VMware Workstation machine somewhere else, or even a vCenter server, you can connect to them and then you can manage those machines from here. Let's cancel that. What else can you do here? So virtualize a physical machine. It's a very good feature that VMware has. So if you have a physical desktop that you want to virtualize, maybe it's a server that's on running on a physical machine, you want to virtualize that, you'd use this feature here. Now this feature requires a product called the vCenter converter. You need to download that from this location, and then what you can do is use that software along with Workstation Pro to virtualize a physical machine. So a physical server that's probably in a rack in your infrastructure, you can actually virtualize it, and then that will save you obviously space, power, so forth. So what other things do we have here? You can also map virtual disks. If you've got any disks that are saved on your hard drive, a virtual machine disk, you can actually map it to your Windows 10 machine, and then you can go into your virtual disks and you can then manage the disks. Maybe if you wanted to, you know, copy data over to it, or copy data from it, or back it up, or so forth, you could do that as well. Let's just close this. Virtual network editor. If we're going to edit, virtual network editor is a very cool feature. It allows you to create multiple subnets and multiple virtual networks. At the moment, I've got two virtual networks here. I've got VMnet 1 and VMnet 8. VMnet 1 connects to my host only, and VMnet 8 is NATed, so it translates, it's doing network address translation from my host to my virtual machines. You can also create additional networks, you can add networks, you can remove networks, you can change the NAT settings. This is all out of the scope of this video. It's just a quick video on how to install the software and how to create virtual machines, and then check some of the configurations of the virtual machines and how to configure them. So let's just close out of this. Preferences, again, this is just to do with your VMware Workstation settings. So for me, everything is saved to this location here, all my virtual machines. Now I don't want to save to my C drive because my C drive isn't very large, so I'm going to change this location, which is my users folder, and then my AJ Labs user directory, and then the documents folder and a folder called virtual machines. So I'm just going to change that to my H drive /VMs. So all my VMs will be saved in there. Input, that's just some of the settings that you can change in terms of how the keyboard and mouse interact with VMware Workstation. Hotkeys are some of the keys that you use to sort of grab and release the mouse and keyboard. You can go through some of these at your own time. Display settings, you know, resizing the windows of the guest and the virtual machines. USB. So when you connect the USB, what happens? If you connected a USB to your PC while VMware Workstation is running, VMware Workstation for the default setting will ask you what you want it to do. So you can do that, or you can just change this to connect the device to the host, which means your PC, or connect the device to the virtual machine. Updates, again, you can change these settings or keep them as default. I don't want it to check for updates, so I'll just leave that. Feedback is if you want to join the VMware Customer Experience Improvement Program. Shared virtual machines and the location to save the shared virtual machines. Again, I don't want it to save on my C drive. I'm just going to change that to my H drive. Memory, how much memory you have on your machine. So I've got 32 gig of memory. You'd ideally want at least 16 gig of memory, as I said. So mine's got 32 gig, and it will reserve 28 gig of memory for the virtual machines, for all the running virtual machines. So you can go through some of these settings. Let's just cancel out of this. Again, the VM itself, so these are settings that relate to the virtual machines. We'll see some of we'll be able to look into these settings once we've created a virtual machine. We'll be able to amend some of these and take a look deeper. And finally, we've got the tabs button, which is obviously your tabs here, and then the help. Now, the help is very useful. If you want to know more about VMware Workstation and you want a much more detailed information about it, what you can do is go to the online documentation. If I click on that, this will take me to the VMware Workstation Pro documentation, which is very, very useful. You can go through the sections, the versions. Obviously, we're using version 15, and then it will tell you all about how to use it, the different settings and so forth. So that will give you a much more detailed outlook on VMware Workstation. So I think that's it for the overview of the menu. Now let's create a virtual machine. So two ways to do that. You can click here, create a virtual machine. If you have a virtual machine, you can open it, or you can connect to a remote server. We're just going to create a virtual machine. You can go to File, and you can say New Virtual Machine from there. I'll just click on this icon, create a new virtual machine. I usually keep the typical settings, so let's do that. So suppose you want to, learn about Windows 10 or maybe Linux or maybe Windows 7. You want to just create one machine in your lab environment that you want to set up and be able to practice with. You can then just keep the typical settings, click on next. Now you're going to need an ISO file, which is an installer disk image of the operating system that you're going to install. So I've already got mine on the desktop here. It's an old version of Windows 10, 1607. If I click on browse, if I go to my desktop, I'll see the Windows 10 ISO that I've got, which is a disk image file. Click on that, open it, and then it gives me the path to it. If I click on next, it's asking me for the Windows 10 product key. I don't have it, so I'm just going to use it as a trial version. Again, it's just a lab, so we're just going to quickly go through this. It's the Windows 10 Enterprise version. Full name, AJ Labs. I'll create myself a password. Create myself a quick password here. There we go. Click on next. It's just giving me a warning saying you didn't enter Windows product key. Windows will install without one, but must be manually activated later. So it's just saying you need to activate your Windows operating system later on. That's not a problem for me. I don't need to activate it. It's just a trial version. Click on yes, I want to continue, and then it's just telling me to give it a name. And if I want, I can just call that Windows 10 x64. Keep it as default. Here it's telling me where do you want to save it to. So it's gone back. It's defaulted back to that location of C, and then my users, my profile, documents, virtual machines. I'm going to change that to my H drive, so it stores it there for me. I'll just call it Windows 10 for now. There we go. Let's click on next. The size of the hard disk, if you've got plenty of space, then yep, you can increase this. If not, it gives you a default of 60 gigabytes of storage space for your C drive. I'm just going to keep that and click on next. And there you go. Then it just gives you a quick summary of what's going to happen. It's going to create the VM with this name in this location, and it is telling you the hard disk size, the RAM it's just over 2 gig, and it's going to be NATed, and it's also got 2 cores, CD, DVD, USB, so forth connected. So it's a physical machine, obviously physical machine, all the features of a physical machine, just in a virtual environment. So we can customize this. If I wanted, I could just say customize, and I can change this. So I can change the RAM to 4 gig if I wanted. I can change the processors to more than that. I can say 2 processors if I want. So depending on the resources you have, you need to consider carefully the settings that you're going to change here, because it can impact on the performance of your actual physical machine that you're using. So by default, I usually just keep the default that VMware gives me, unless I know exactly what I'm trying to do with the machine. I normally just keep the defaults. So click on close. Let's just say finish, and now that's going to kick off the creation of our virtual machine. Once it does that, we'll come back to it. It will be powered on. We'll log in, and also we'll check some of these settings that relate to the VM. This may happen for yourself. You need to quickly, I'll just show you what you need to do. Is you need to quickly click on here and press enter. So you need to quickly click on the screen itself, and once your keyboard and mouse has obviously been activated in the virtual machine, you need to quickly press enter. So that's something you might need to consider, just as obviously if it happens to you, do the same thing there. So it's just going to go through the installation process of Windows. Once it's installed, as you can see, it's at 0%. Once it's installed, it's going to log in, reboot, and then it's going to come back to the login screen again. So we'll log into our completed installation of Windows 10, and then what we'll do is we'll look at the VM settings. Okay, so there you go. It's as simple as that, creating a virtual machine. Windows 10 is now completed. If I click on it, it will ask me to log in. I can type in my password, and I can now start practicing or learning on Windows 10. So if you are somebody who's wanting to learn a particular operating system, you could obviously install Windows 10, Linux, whatever it is you want to study, Windows Server, and and you can, this is the good thing about VMware, is it simplifies the process of creating a virtual lab for yourself. It was as simple as that. Now, one other thing, if you want to change some of the settings of the virtual machine, you can, as I said, go to the VM tab, and it gives you a number of options. Power, you can shut down, suspend, restart, power off, and so forth. Removable devices, if you want to connect a CD, a virtual CD, which is obviously which will need either a disk image of some sort, you can connect that. Floppies, nobody really uses unless you've got some sort of external floppy drive, but again, why would you want to use that? You can use a USB, and yeah, you can connect a camera. But if we go to, and you can also send some of the common keys, Windows keys, like Control or Delete. Now, if we go to the settings, this will now give you the specific settings for this virtual machine, settings that relate to only this virtual machine. So again, as I said, remember we changed the RAM before, you can change it here. The CPU, you can't change it while it's powered on, so you need to power off the virtual machine and then you'll be able to change the CPU. The hard disk, you can also add additional things, additional hardware, like additional hard disk you can add. If you wanted to add another disk which you can then store data on, you can do that. I won't do it here, but go through some of these options, explore them. The network adapter, which is NATed, as you can see. In this instance, it's connected to VMnet 0. If I click on custom network, it gives me a number of other options. So VMnet 1, which I can use for the host only, which is directly connected to the host, or VMnet 8, which is doing the NATing. Again, we'll just keep it as default. We'll just NAT it. You can also bridge and you can also bridge and connect to the network directly. So yeah, that's it. So go through some of these settings. You've got the options here. Some of these options give you, it tells you a bit more about the virtual machine, so where the working directory is, where it's saved, the power on options, what some of these buttons do, as you can see, so you can change these buttons around. Shared folders, if you want to connect to a folder that's on your physical machine, you can actually connect to it there, or even on a network path. So yeah, you've got more options. Again, we've seen these options before. You can change some of these options and explore them, but that's the power of virtualization and creating yourself a virtual lab. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Please feel free to post any questions in the comment section. If you feel the video has helped you, then please subscribe, like and share, and I'll see you in the next video.